This podcast provides a platform for our guests to express their own personal views and opinions. Some or all of these views and opinions may not be shared by Ben and/or Yoel.
Welcome to the Too Dad to Quit podcast,
the podcast where we highlight stories of dads on the other side of divorce
to inspire and give strength to dads going through it.
I'm Ben.
And I'm Yoel.
Welcome back to the Too Dad to Quit podcast. You can find us on toodadtoquit.com, Too Dad to Quit on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all the places. We are now on Spotify video and YouTube music app, and we are expanding as we go. And don't forget to rate the podcast, share the podcast. Let us know in the comments your feedback about the podcast. We want to hear your questions. We want to address your questions. We want to bring on experts to answer your questions. Well, we really hope you enjoyed last week's episode, the Too Dad to Quit moments from season 1. If you haven't heard it, please go back to episode 25. It's definitely something that we think will inspire you to enjoy the small moments and all those little moments that will make you appreciate what you're doing and how hard you're working. And it's not those big moments, those big accomplishments, even the small ones will inspire you to keep going, to strive to be a better father. And we really hope you enjoy that. This week, we're going to highlight all of the advice that our guests have shared with us, and it's a wide range of advice. I think that it's really important to have it all in one place instead of having to go and search every episode and find that advice. There's a lot in there, and we really appreciate it and thank all of our guests for sharing their insights and their own personal stories. And as you will hear, everyone has their own little advice that they got from going through such an experience.
Yeah, and what I particularly appreciate about the advice, Ben, is that it's so wide-ranging. Like some of our guests talked about the relationship aspects, how to sort of move on and find your way in relationships. Others talked about navigating even the legal process. Not that we're giving legal advice, but some of the legal challenges that many have faced. Others have talked about the financial challenges. Others have talked about all sorts of different ideas, overall spiritual principles. So there's really something for everyone, and I'm really grateful that we're able to present this in a very concise and efficient manner.
Yeah, and if you have any advice that you don't think was covered, we would love to hear it in the comments, in the feedback, DM us. And again, we're always looking for new guests to share their stories. If you're a dad, we want to share your story, and we think everyone will benefit from it. So please reach out, and we're so excited to get started with season 2 next week. We had Jeremy Hess. He's a father of 2. If there's one advice for any dad going through this and this divorce process, what advice would that be?
So, wow, a piece of advice. There's so much to be given because there's so much to experience. Depending on where you are in your process, that the first thing I say in most things is, let's figure out, where we are right now. So I guess we'll take as an example, you got divorced a week ago and you are living alone for a week and you have a few kids. So the initial piece of advice that I would give when you're already in that situation is to make sure that you reach out to who you need to reach out to ground yourself first. So whether that's family or friends, you need to have people surrounding you. If you have the right people surrounding you to care and give you advice and help you in whatever way, that's going to ground you, and it's going to put you on the right path to taking care of your children. Number one, right? I mean, At the end of the day, they are everything for us. So
couldn't agree more. We have Stephen Shear. He's a reporter for Reuters for over 26 years. He has 2 children. Some kind of advice for guys that are going through it. And, something to some thought that kind of you had in your mind when you were going through the whole process, the idea of valleys and then mountaintops. So we're talking, our target is more the people that are in the valley or about to enter the valley, and you're more or less getting to that other mountaintop. So looking back, what advice would you give yourself back then?
Looking back, I do believe, I don't know if I said it before, but yeah, it was towards the end, it was very bad. You don't think there's going to be a light at the end of the tunnel. You really don't. It's your whole life is coming crashing in. You don't know how you're going to be able to support yourself, your kids. And how you're going to live. And after I finished crying, giving the get, you kind of feel like a relief, like you could start again, because you really are starting a little bit over again. You've got to do things that you didn't think you knew how to do. Look, if you don't cook, you got to learn how to cook.
Yeah.
Probably. You got to learn how to do laundries. You got to learn how to make lunches. One of the toughest things, and I haven't done it yet, is do my daughter's hair. I don't know how to do my daughter's hair. She comes from her mother's house looking so nice.
Yeah.
And for me, I don't know how to do her hair.
Here's a ponytail.
Yeah. Here's a cuckoo.
Yeah.
Here you go. I don't think.
That's right. I get lucky. I have older daughters that help my younger daughters. So yeah.
But once I got through COVID, and COVID was actually a blessing for me. I really do. I got a chance, even though it was not easy from a social standpoint, it helped me with my relationship with my kids, because we get to spend a lot of time together. And my son, who was very much a mama's boy, is now 50-50, I guess you could say. We bond over sports, baseball, our love of Star Wars and Marvel movies. We have a great relationship now. I have a great relationship with both my kids, better than I ever had. To bring it all together,
Yeah.
It's good. You are relieved. It was a weight lifter off your shoulder, and things might financially be tough, but you're happier, hopefully.
Morty Charnowitz, who is a coach. He's got a very interesting background. He's got 3 little kids. Something you can give over to help them through the process, because you're on the other side. Something for them that are going through it, and how hard it was for you when you first separated, and how emotionally, whatever. What got you through that? And maybe it's something that can help.
There's a lot of things. One is that I didn't look at it as sides. I stayed very present at all times. I knew I had a lot of recognition, whether it was from somebody else or whether it was on myself. So I knew I couldn't deal with this, give it over. There are people willing to help you if you reach out. My whole life, I never reached out for people's help. I finally did here. There are so many people that, especially anyone here, anyone dealing with it, I'd love to help. My main thing also in life, a coach, parent, whatever it is, I don't want anyone to have to go through what I went through. Right? So I will do anything in my power, stick up for bullies, whatever it is. I've done it. There are people fighting over there or whatever, and I just stuck out. Some guy was bullying, and I'm like, excuse me, you can go away. And people, I thought people are scared. I used to be a tiny little kid, but now that I tried, I sound like a superhero, but I'm not.
You are, man.
I'm, and again, it's what gives me this more. I take all the pressures out of here. There's pressures are all self-inflicted. I would say I'm about 80% released of almost all the pressures.
Wow.
I know the traffic, right? So, and it's getting worse every day. So I used to leave at 3:15 and get there at 3:45. Now I leave, yesterday I left at 2:45 and got there at 3:40. So it's just, And it's 15 minutes, it's 10 minutes, it's 20 minutes. But if you sit there and add it up and then you take out all these little pressures in life, it takes away a lot of anger. Anger is not a feeling. Anger is a reaction of a feeling. Right? So when you're angry, you're hurt, or you feel taken advantage of, or I don't know how to say it, like an emotional feeling. Like, what's that feeling? Like
I mean, there's resentment. There's
resentment or whatever there is. It's again,
There's a
constantly
trigger. There's a
look-
trigger.
Constantly look in the mirror, see, but be honest. Because if you're not going to be honest with yourself, it's never going to work. So, I can sit there and then I go to my therapist. Like, I even ask her now, like, whatever the life that I'm living. She's like, so where do you see? She keeps asking, where do you see yourself in this and this amount of years? Then I'm staying very present and I'm enjoying what I do have. And if that's last year, that's great. And I asked her, I'm like, am I being delusional? She's like, no, you're just staying present. And I'm like, and she's like, why? And sometimes she'll laugh, like, why do you feel like you've been doing so much better? And she saw me progress. Like, even our common friend said, like, in 6 months, I'm a person that if I have something wrong, I know there's something wrong. I will work as hard as I possibly can to fix it.
And this is an obvious question, but just for other men out there, it sounds like you're a very big proponent for therapy.
Yeah, big time. There's no reason why you shouldn't. Like, that's such an old pastime thing. Like, I've been going to
Right, the
therapy.
stigma, yeah.
I mean, my parents sent me to a therapist. She betrayed me. That's why I have like a lot of betrayal. And it just that divorce thing, it brings up anything you ever shoved down in the child, it will bring up and multiply it by 100. Okay, it'll bring it up. You'll turn into a crazy. And if you turn into a crazy, that's okay. It's understandable. Stay in your room.
Right.
Okay. Don't react off your emotions, because
The bathroom is
you will
your
get everything taken away from you.
Noah Joseph. He is a car fanatic. He has 2 young children. The last thing we like to leave our guests with is some advice for dads going through divorce, because it can be, as you know, an emotional time, a stressful time, a hopeless time, depending on how it is. What advice can you give anyone going through it, and something that maybe got you through it, something that you kept saying over and over in your mind?
It's not the end of the world. You'll come out the other end. Your life might be falling apart, but it isn't over. You can rebuild, and just check yourself. Figure out what you need to do to get through it, and if there are changes that you think you need to make in your life, you need to figure that out. And look inwards, because you're not getting it from outwards anymore. You don't have that partner who's going to help you through things, who's going to help you figure out what's going on and how to deal with it. You're on your own. You're going to have to figure it out for yourself, and it might be time to make a change in your life. And if it is, figure out what that is and go after it with the same vigor that you might have in trying to keep your marriage together.
He has 3 boys, one 10-and-a-half-year-old from his first marriage, and one 3-and-a-half-year-old, and one 2-year-old with his new wife, Vivi. Give a piece of advice for any dads going through divorce right now, to give them the strength and give them some advice from somebody who's been through it, and now you're kind of at the top of that valley, and so you can give advice to the people that are behind it.
Well, I'll give 2 pieces of advice, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
One for those before and after. Stop me if you don't stop me if you've heard this one before, because I might have said it a couple times. But first thing is, don't before the divorce, don't push off getting help. Prioritize your own relationship. If it's bad and it's going there, but you'll get help later, you'll be getting divorced. It's not worth it to wait. Money, time. If you feel that something's wrong and you don't work on it, it'll cost you a heck of a lot more in time and money later on. So just don't wait on that. The other side is, and the more combative side, the more combative piece of advice is afterwards, don't bow to threats or bullying. If someone threatens to report you to the Revachat, to Family Services, okay, go for it. Do it. Call them first, say, hey, look, I'm just letting you know, we're here, we're in a high conflict situation. You'll be hearing, I'm sure, don't accuse, I'm not saying to accuse first or anything like that. I'm saying don't let yourself be put into a box where you're playing defense, In my case, don't agree to going to your parents' house every weekend. No, that's ridiculous. I'm 30 plus years old, know how to take care of a kid. That's it. And then, ideally, when there's nothing to threaten with, okay, then you can get down and talk normally. At least that's the idea.
Don't be afraid. Can I say that as well? Like, don't act out of fear.
Yeah, that's right. Don't act out of fear, resignation, or anything like that. You gotta, I don't want to say fight, because ideally not. Don't start the fight, but don't
stand up for yourself.
There you go. Thank you. Stand up for yourself. That's probably good to put it. And of course, stand up for your kids too. And part of standing up for your kids is you need to be there for them.
Awesome.
But yeah, definitely get help first. Don't go through it if you don't have to, because even on the best case situation, it still sucks.
Rabbi Aaron David Poston, he was married for a number of years, had 6 kids.
Yep, 6 kids.
6 kids, because this podcast is focusing on and trying to help the guys and dads that are going through divorce. So some advice that you would give that helped you get through that hard period of time during the divorce, after the divorce. I think you have some wisdom that we could really use.
I think that it's a complicated question. Everyone is a little different. To enhance their faith, not only in any kind of superior being, but in themselves. Too many men go into a depressive state. So you need like an anchor. That was let's say, the social relationships you have, but with God. In other words, along with some kind of supernatural power, supernal power, but the truth is it's within you. And so get in touch with that. Don't let yourself get so down. If it's not a done deal, try everything you can. Try to leave no rock unturned. Is that an expression?
Yep.
So that later on you don't have any regrets that you didn't do something. Because it is painful. Again, everyone's in a different situation, whether you have children, whether they're grown up, whether they're young. Or could just destroy you financially. It could destroy you psychologically. So to be anchored as much as you can with friends, social network, and with a higher power, whether it's within you or external, which both. And that's really what I suggest.
A.B. Shama, Zach Miller. He is an entrepreneur, a guy with a giant beard down past his chest. He has 5 kids. He was married for 25 years. If you can give advice to any of those dads that are going through divorce, thinking about divorce, something, just you would give to them to get through it, and let them know they're not alone.
Yeah. So I would give them a blessing. I don't really have advice, but the blessing would be that you have what you need to get through it. You may not feel it now. You may be brought to your knees to be able to feel it, but you will feel it at some point. But that process is gold. That process is the process that's going to rebuild you, and to not be afraid of it. In some way, you have to surrender to it, and to know that you're not alone in this. Like, that's one of the most beautiful things when you start to do men's work, and you share, like on this podcast, you share, Mankind Project in a circle. most of us are dealing with very similar issues. And so most of us have not been taught how to be men. Most of us aren't equipped for a divorce. Most of us can see a divorce coming, like with the headlights at us, but there's nothing you can do about it. But you'll get through it. Your children can get through it. But the only way to do that is if you're healthy and you're in your power. And so, it's a wonderful, as much as it hurts, and as much as it's an opportunity to like feel the darkness, it's also opportunity to step into your power and into your calling and your mission. Like, that's beautiful. Things break, but for the most part, you can put some of them back together.
The Judge Joe Hochheiser interview, he went from, defending the innocent as a lawyer to now being a judge for domestic violence cases. Some people are listening that have gone through a divorce or are going through a divorce. Some people are thinking about going through a divorce. We also have 20% that are women that are listeners. So what advice would you give to anyone who's thinking about going through divorce, just to help them through the process? Something that you learned that anybody you speak to, or you think wisdom that you have to share?
Divorce is not the answer. Divorce is not the paradise and the free for all and the singles event that you think it may be. I was trying to be appropriate. Getting divorced, you don't get divorced to be happy. You get divorced to put yourself in a position to be happy again. If you think you're going to get divorced because you want to go have fun, or that you think that this is going to be the answer to all of your issues, you're wrong. Work on your marriage. Try it. Go to therapy. Work at therapy. Go through that process. Go through marriage counseling. Divorce is not cheap. It's not fun. It's an emotional drain on you, your partner, and your children. But then if you have to do it, don't be scared of it, because it's worth it. It's worth putting yourself in a position to be happy again. If you know that you can't be happy within your marriage, don't be scared of divorce. And also don't be scared to fight for what you feel is right. Combine that with don't be scared to compromise. It is sometimes better to be happy than to be right. That's actually just what my therapist just told me. Would you rather be, my wife is literally laughing in the other room. Is it better to be right, or is it better to be happy? Sometimes it's okay to give in, especially in a divorce, because it's not about being right. She may be a psycho, horrible person. And you know what? You can still give in, and you can take it on the chin, and you could, in a divorce, say, you know what? You're wrong. Don't say that, but think it, just get it done with. The faster it's done with, the better it's going to be for all the people. And I'm now on the other side of it. You're paying your attorney $300 an hour. They're going to go to court. That's going to cost you $3,000. You're literally fighting over $5,000. So you're not fighting over $5. You're really fighting over $2. And you're fighting over that over 18 years. You want to break that down per month? You're right. You don't need to give her that $5,000. But break it down. Is it worth it? Would you rather be happy, or would you rather be right? So for the people who are thinking of getting divorced, it's not the paradise that you think it is. Work hard on making it work. But if you don't, put yourself first, but also look at the big picture, because the big picture oftentimes are not the small little arguments that you think they are. So those are my two pieces of advice.
Brian Schoen, my old high school roommate. He happens to be, I guess, a money manager for the last, 20 years or so. He's got 4 kids. The whole idea of the podcast, you nailed it in the beginning, is to, we went through something, and if there's anything that we could do to make it better or easier or stop it, for anyone else who's going through it or thinking about going through a divorce. So any advice that you could share to someone who's thinking about it? We actually have 20% of our listeners are women. So, you know, if it helps save one marriage or make this process easier for one person, you know, it's worth it.
I mean, several things. You know, it's always like a saying, like it takes a village, and it does. And you know, marriage takes a village, divorce takes a village, life takes a village, right? And just having good people, surrounding yourself with good people that you could trust. Be honest and open and honest with yourself, with your own flaws. Like most people can't have a hard time understanding their part, but recognize there's always two parties, and try to see things from the other person's perspective. Seek help. At the end of the day, that's also, you know, in divorce, seeking help is the idea is like the hardest thing is you need two people to want to seek help. So whether it be you need both parties saying, I want it to work. I want to try. The moment where I realized, well, we tried, but that one wasn't willing to put in the continuous effort, that was when I was like, okay, we need to part, because I don't want my kids to see that, right? I don't want my kids to, that's not the way that I want them to view what marriage is. You know, and it's not just two people living under one roof calling mom and dad. That's not marriage. That's not love. That's not intimacy. That's not like so if you're, first of all, if you're in like a situation that it's dire, ask for help. If you need to bring in call the police, right? You know, whenever you call a doctor and you know, it says like, if you're in immediate danger, go seek help. So first of all, that and seek help, you know, whether you're in that situation. And hopefully most people are not in that type of dire situation, but also seek help. Find your Chevys of the world, find your, you know, Ben Yoels of the world that are willing. I have no problem, total honesty. You could post on your page my email address, or my Facebook account. Like I honestly, like, if I could help anybody and everybody, I'd do it in a heartbeat. And that's kind of like morphed in Michigan's, like anybody who's going through, man or woman, going through it, I'll sit and grab a drink with you. Granted, I will tell you honestly, like there's several like husbands that got angry with me that I went to drinks with their spouse because they thought I was taking them on a date, and I was really just helping them through their divorce.
Gets tricky.
But neither here nor there. So like I will still do that all day long, because like that's just like, you know, I know who I am, and I'm going to help. I'm just somebody who's willing to help. The other thing is, I would tell you is like, nobody wants to be talked down to. Nobody wants to be yelled at. Nobody wants to be. So if you're going to communicate with your spouse, which is the parent of your child, right? Like the father or mother of your child, that will not go well, right? So just like you don't want to be yelled at, don't yell at somebody. You want to communicate it, don't communicate it in front of your children. Do it in a safe spot. If you have to leave and get a babysitter and go discuss these things, so be it. Like, we don't yell in front of. I'm not a yeller in general. Like, we didn't have verbal abuse or physical abuse in my marriage. We don't have like, you know, berating. Don't do that, because there's no positive outcome to it. Like, you try to use that as leverage, it ends up being like a negative. It'll come out as court as a negative. Look what they're doing. It won't make you look good. If you have the ability of using going to arbitration versus using a bunch of divorce lawyers, again, nothing wrong with the divorce lawyers, but it's very expensive. And majority of the time, they're the ones that are like making out better than necessarily what you're making out. In many instances, you need it because you just can't communicate. But also recognize if and when this is the right thing for you. There is life after. The world is not ending. You are going to be okay. Some people it'll take 6 months. Some people will take a year. Some people will take 3 years. But there is life after divorce. It is, you know, and I would just say it's hard to have a positive outlook because you're going through something so traumatic. But I would tell you is reframe. It's like we're starting over. There's a lot of, you know, positives like to having your own time. There's a lot of positives focusing your energy on your children, on your career, and don't have, you know, you'll always have woe is me, but don't inwardly blame yourself. It's so easy to be like, oh, if I did this differently, this wouldn't have happened. There's no one instance. I mean, sometimes there may be, but like majority of the times, there's no one instance that led to this, or one instance that could save this. You have to do your part, and just recognize also is for future relationships. Dig deep, go back, look back at what happened, and how do you see yourself? What did you do wrong? You know, you're not trying to fix it anymore. Well, how could I personally become a better person, better father, better human, better colleague, better friend? What are the things that I was missing? What are the things that and being able to do that work. It's funny, I had a conversation with somebody on a dating app recently, and she's like, I only date divorced dads. And I'm like, it's so interesting. She's never been married, no kids. She's like, they've done the work. None of the single guys do the work.
Wow. All right. That's
That's
awesome.
a first.
Yeah, that's awesome.
All right. So watch out actually for her. No.
To Damian Andrews. He's a veteran of the Australian Army. He is a philanthropist, a CEO of a foundation. He is a divorcee and a father of a 14-year-old boy. Some advice for either a husband, a wife, a dad that's going through divorce, considering divorce. Just some advice to get them through it, to maybe change their mind. Just, you've been through it. You're on the other side. I know it wasn't easy for you. Just something, give them strength and inspire them, and let them know, from your perspective, something that you wish you would have heard when you were going through it.
Yeah, that's a tough one. It's balanced with, because I spent a lot of time trying to not get divorced. And that's, learning that point that no amount of skill is going to fix a poor partner choice, in the sense of, it was never going to work. It was never, right from the very beginning, it was never going to work. And nothing that I did was going to change that. But I think it's important for me, recognizing that, I was always a good person inside. Yeah, some of my behaviors weren't, could have been better. But as a good person, that you are a good person inside, that you are, if you're recognizing that you've got things to work on, then you're a good person. You're not a sociopath, you're not a narcissist or anything like that, as much as you might get a whole bunch of that stuff thrown at you. You need to recognize, and there's a poem called Man in the Mirror, not the Michael Jackson song, there's another one, and it goes along the lines of, if you can look in the mirror and like yourself, which comes back to, I was talking about with my dad, then that's all that matters. And that's what you really need to find, that in your source of strength, that you are a good person, that you, if you like yourself, it doesn't matter what gets thrown at you, you can work through it and keep moving forward. So yeah, it's a challenging one. There's a lot of different dynamics in that. You mentioned about, most of the divorces initiated by the women. That's something I think we need to change. That, if your relationship is not working and you are going to break up, and a number of people, wise people, told me that. They said, play it with a straight bat. Don't, if it's not working, the sooner you get things in terms of the law, like some orders as far as parenting, those kind of things, the easier it's going to be. And we try and delay that. And you'll know from as being a lawyer, if it's in writing and you've got it per the law, you've got a lot more legal standing than if you don't. And certainly when you're talking about abductions and things like that, where people deny access, all that kind of thing, it's almost impossible to deal with if you don't have some sort of legal framework to rely upon. And without parenting orders, you don't. It's, well, certainly in Australia, you don't. I don't know what the laws are like in all the other countries, but so yeah, what number one is, like yourself, look in the mirror and recognize that you are a good person, and you should do that regardless, no matter what your life is like. You should like yourself. You are an amazing human being. take time to help others would be the other thing I'd put in there, and formalize things legally as soon as possible.
Barry Nussbaum, he is a family attorney in Toronto.
Father of 5 beautiful children.
As a family law litigator, attorney, what advice would you give for a father who's about to go into this process? And he knows that he needs to get a lawyer, he needs to figure out, somebody gave me advice where just figure out what you want.
Exactly.
Don't go in there wishy-washy.
That's it, baby. That's exactly it. And that's it, baby. I'm saying that so I'm gonna take that to the next level. Jordan's gonna appreciate this.
Yoel, I know it's Yoel, but I haven't corrected
because
you. Because
those that know me know that I speak with someone. I say it as it is. I have 3 sisters. I don't have any brothers. Okay, so to me, men and women, there's no such thing. One's better than the other. One's smarter than the other. There's equal. Okay, and we all of us grew up in North America, and it's a serious comment. The idea that I tell this to my staff all the time. The whole concept of the men are, the old school mentality of the men are, above and they have the corporate jobs and the women, secretaries, that doesn't even exist in my world. So I say that as a preamble because I'm about to say the following. When a man who's getting divorced, you have to ask yourself, like you just said, what do you want? Do you want 50% of the kids because you really want it, or you just want to stick it to her? If you ask most guys, I don't know if they really want 50%. If they like working more of the time and being able to be successful in their career, and they're satisfied with seeing the kids less, it doesn't mean that you're not as equal. It just means you're focused more on the livelihood. So take any traditional home, and most homes around, one parent is working more than the other. That parent's seeing the kids less. Does that mean the kid loves dad less or mom less? No, that's the way the world is. So you have to ask yourself, if you're statistically, the men are usually the primary breadwinner. If you are a successful primary breadwinner and you're happy and you got a good job and you like going to work and you feel good about yourself and your kids are good, do you just want to stick it to her and get 50%? You could, but if your career is going to suffer, is that a good move? I'd say no. And then I say to my clients, but if you're the type of guy that you're an equal caregiver or a primary caregiver and you're doing most of the work, and I have plenty of clients like that, most of the caregiving work, God, by all means. And no judge is going to look at you and say, hey, you're a man, you can't get that. Doesn't work like that. So that's and a woman should say the same thing to themselves. But I think very often the men feel that because the women very often think that, they assume they're the primary caregiver, right? That happens very often. They just assume it. And the men they assume that they're not, and they feel they have to compensate for that, but not to a detriment. But again, I feel I have to say this, and I have the same conversation with clients all the time. It doesn't mean, I'm not saying it because I think that men should be working all the time and I should never be the primary caregiver. This is what you see in a legal practice.
Joe Bergavoy,
great dad. He's got a 9-year-old daughter, and he's obviously very devoted to her.
Some advice, the guy that hasn't actually finished the whole divorce process, thinking about doing it. He and his wife are thinking about it. Their partner's thinking about it. They don't know what to do. So some advice, for them, and also, somebody going through it, to keep them going and not giving up on life, on themselves, on the big picture, the finish line, as you say.
So I would say, get a coach or a friend that can guide you through it, because I really have changed these people's lives. I've saved them like tens of thousands of dollars and months of problems, because if we're going to speak to our ex, from that dark place, it's going to make a lot of problems. And then people call the police on each other and people get arrested, and like we're adding trauma upon more trauma. So have a safe person that can guide you through it. If you're seeing if you're ready or not, like you just got to take that step. Like when someone wants to start a business, they're very afraid, lots of unknowns. I was terribly afraid of what was going to happen. What's my community going to say? What's my family going to say? But at the end of the day, in 2023, like the news cycle, no one cares who Leonardo DiCaprio dated 2 days ago. You know, that's like 2 days. That's like 2 days ago. Like it's scary for a few days. People will get used to it. Okay, so Mike is divorced. No one really cares. It's just like a status of life. You'll feel a lot better. You know, when you're in a tumultuous relationship, it drains your soul. And once you're 6 months out, a year out, the burden is gone. You're able to breathe your own air. Like even when I interact with my ex and, if there's some strife, you have that toxicity for a half hour, an hour, you go to court, it's tough. But 95% of the time, or 98, you're breathing your own air. You can create your own apartment, your own energy. You do what you want with your kids. That's what you deserve. You deserve inner peace. So just take that step if you're ready. Get your attorney. People won't be as shocked as you think they'll be. Eventually, they'll just get used to it. And just do what's best for you. You got to put yourself first. That's what the number one thing is.
Brian A. Vandiver. He is a father, a divorced father, but more importantly, he's an advocate and a lobbyist. And it's trying to make shared custody kind of the default for parents going through divorce, and not where it matters who's the mother, who's the father. Just equal parenting should be the default in the system.
He's happily remarried. He's got a blended family. He's got a busy law practice.
You've been through it. You've started over. You've gone the whole gamut, I would say. Marriage, divorce, marriage, kids, stepkids, you got a big spectrum there. Any advice you would give to our listeners that are going through it, thinking about doing it? Not sure, 20% of our listeners are actually women, which is really cool.
Yeah.
And I hear they, from the feedback is they just want to hear the other side. And I think, them seeing what it's like after from a guy's perspective, I think has great value. If they're considering it, especially, there's 70% of the women. If we stop 20%, I'll be happy. So any advice you have there?
Wow. Advice. There's a lot of things I would have done differently. You can always Monday morning quarterback.
Yeah.
But to be honest, a lot of the way I look at it is that, I went through it because it made me better. And I wouldn't be who I am today, and probably wouldn't be as passionate about the issue had I not gone through it. So what I would say is, realize that you're not going to do everything perfect. You're not going to do everything correctly. And if you're always trying to do your best and trying to do what's best for your children, usually it, in the end, it's going to work out some way or another. And even if it just seems like there's no hope, there's always hope. So don't give up and just keep trying. From a litigation standpoint, I would say just try to always take the high road and just don't feed into any baiting of conflict. I think a lot of dads get trapped in taking that bait and engaging in that conflict, and it being used against them to their disadvantage. So try to take the high road and just, if there's going to be an argument, or just walk away and come back to it another time.
Very wise words.
Take a deep breath.
Yeah.
Yochanan Pollock. He's a therapist. He's also a divorced father. He has a super blended family.
Which means He has children from a previous marriage. She has children from a previous marriage, and they have children together.
Some words of wisdom for people that are thinking about it, going through it, have been through it, something that they should have in mind. Maybe how to pick a therapist would be a great idea. I think your insights into that would be super helpful. And anything else that, you've been through it and you got through it somehow with your guitar and
I had a whole thing here that I didn't say a word about. Hilarious.
Oh my goodness.
I wrote down, maybe we'll do a separate podcast. But
Yeah, we'll have to get you on round 2, Yochanan, for
think of
sure.
my personal story and what I would say not from a therapist point of view. I will just say this, and you can edit this out if you want, but I will just say this. More important sometimes than a good therapist is a good friend. And to understand what it means to have a good friend. A friend who really cares about you and really loves you and isn't scared to tell you the truth. And that's important. So that's what I would say.
We say this all the time to each other.
So it really can't be underestimated how important, friends can be. And it says in Chazal, it says in the rabbinic literature as well, Knei lecha chaver, acquire for yourself a friend. Why the word acquire? Because it's something that takes acquisition. You have to work at it. You have to invest. You have to put work in. Sometimes you may even have to take them out for dinner and pay for it. Doesn't matter if you have more
pay
money
for their
than them.
therapy.
Right? Therapists are someone you pay to talk to.
No, or pay your friend to go to therapy.
Or pay your friend to go to therapy.
Aaron Jeter, not Derek Jeter. He has actually written a children's book, which is how we found him, called Weekends and Summers with Dad. And he's a history teacher. He's got an interesting situation with his children with custody, and it inspired him to write a story. Some advice that you would give somebody who's thinking about going through divorce, been through divorce, something that got you through it, or some thoughts or advice that, you would leave somebody who came to you today and said, hey, I need some help.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I would say that have you explored all possibilities to try to preserve it? You just don't want to feel like you didn't try, And I always say there's a couple books that I bought. How to Never Fight Again, I think, is one of them. And I felt good that I was able to purchase 2 books for my ex and I. We kind of set aside on Mondays to kind of read it together or try. I'm proud that I found the marriage counselor that we went to for about 2.5 years.
Wow.
And so, I have all of those, and I just try. And then also one of my favorite little clips is by Jocko Wilhelm Good. I don't know if you guys saw that 2-minute thing.
One of my direct subordinates, one of my guys that worked for me, he would call me up or pull me aside with some major problem, some issue that was going on. And he'd say, boss, we got this and that and the other thing. And I'd look at him and I'd say, good. And finally one day he was telling me about some issue that he was having, some problem. And he said, I already know what you're going to say. And I said, well, what am I going to say? He said, you're going to say good.
But he's a lot of my students like him, a lot of people like him, but just to understand that no matter what you're going through, and there's some good that you could be found, in that situation. And although there's that loss of connectivity of that day-to-day interaction of your kids under the same roof, there's some good that you can find in, in that cultivating hobbies for yourself. One of my good friends and I, his name's Justin, he and I started teaching together our first year in 2001. And he said, you always hear parents say the saying, I'll die for my kids. I'll die for my kids. But he said, he saw a quote, I'm going to live for my kids. And that means living through, they seeing you do things, doing, whether it is, hobbies, running, are you just sedentary or are you kind of living life? And that could be also inspirational as well. So there's opportunities in divorce to really find who you are and to cultivate a skill that you're proud of. And I kind of tell some of my buddies that are going through that now, don't just jump into the next relationship because you can. Also figure out what it is that you want to maybe be more proficient at, whether it be jujitsu, golf, writing, but try to cultivate yourself, in addition to the next relationship. And I think sometimes it's easier to kind of just throw yourself into the next situation and that woman and her kids and next you're like, who am I? Because you haven't really set some time aside to work on that.
I thought I'd share one of mine. So I was with my daughter and her zipper got stuck and she wanted to take off her jacket so badly and she couldn't do it. And she came over to me and she's like, I can't get this off. And she just was about to cry. And it took me like a minute and a half and I was able to wiggle the zipper open and I opened it up and I was not expecting it. She gave me the biggest hug she's given me in a very long time. And so I just wanted to say, those Too Dad to Quit moments, they don't have to be the biggest things. They don't have to be, taking them on a trip to a roller coaster. It could just be the little thing of fixing their zipper and you will be their hero. Arnie Goldfein, he has a very interesting story of addiction, which alcohol, which apparently started very, very young. And he had 6 kids and that was the time when he, decided to go and figure this out and go into recovery. And he's been sober for 37 years. Words of wisdom from our guest about if they're about to go through divorce or thinking about divorce. I know, you've taken up biking recently. Just what got you through it and what should they be thinking and what kind of advice if someone would come to you today and say, hey, I don't know what to do. I'm stuck and you've been there already. What would you say to them?
So here we go. That's another 2-hour conversation. Simply put, really, looking at the end of the tunnel is that when you're in the tunnel, there's light at the end of the tunnel, but it's awfully dark inside the tunnel. There's a grieving process. There's a healing process. There's a pain process that we need to go through, or I've needed to go through. I mean, everybody does this differently. And by the way, there's no right or wrong way of doing this. I don't care who it is. There's no formula, but we all have to go through it. And saying, don't give up. Just don't give up. And it's not because you were right or you were wrong or you were bad or you were good. Maybe you needed to go through this to grow through this. It's a phenomenal, picture that we can't draw pictures so easily. And to understand that everything that I have gone through in my life and I continue to go through is to help somebody else. End of story. And it only benefits us. And if we're doing it back to that honesty and open-mindedness and willingness, and there's a sense of value that comes that we didn't have before, for whatever the reasons are. Our parents didn't show us. Maybe they didn't know how to do it. Their parents didn't show. You look at my family's history, they were dysfunctional back from the times they came from Russia in the 1800s. Like, it was crazy stuff. And yet, at the same time, you know what? We all needed to be where we are. And who am I to tell God what God's journey is for myself or for anybody else? Who am I to say that where God has taken me, it stops here? That there's always more, there's always more, there's always more, there's always hope. And it's my job to stay tuned to that hope.
Joe Templin, he's written a book, he's a martial artist, he's a marathoner, and he's also a father of special needs children. We're trying to support guys that are going through divorce, thinking about divorce. And, there's a common thread of figuring out something to latch on to get through that whole period. And I understand your ordeal took a lot, quite some time. What got you through that period of, however easy or whoever, initiated it, it's still not an easy process.
Literally walked in and said, I want a divorce. I want you out of the house for the next week. I want you in counseling. I want you to do these other things. And then we'll talk. I went and I did all that, and her mind had already been made up. So that's what my scenario was for this. So it was dark. It was, we had COVID going on. This was early stage COVID. So my kids were struggling because of everything with school. There was no martial arts to be able to do. There's no running. There was no Cub Scouts. my businesses were starting to implode because of what was going on with COVID. I mean, obviously, there's no speaking, there's no conventions to attend. If there's no conventions, you can't get paid to speak. So there was all this stuff happening simultaneously. So when I was going to counseling, they wanted to talk about my coping mechanism. So they wanted to talk about how much did I drink. I drink a little, but not a lot. I mean, I'm Irish, and I'm German, but I really don't drink that much. I'll have a couple of beers, and I don't even do that much. I have to earn them. My diet's pretty good. I don't eat very much fried food, even though I love donuts and I occasionally splurge. When I splurge, I mean, I splurge like I'll eat a dozen donuts in a day. So, but that's once a month, once every 6 weeks. I read, I write, I meditate. I'm active in my faith. I have good social connections. I'm taking care of others. So when they were talking with me, they're like, you literally have the most powerful, coping mechanisms and structures we've ever seen. Well, let's talk about the stress that you're under in your life. And so I talked about the businesses and, my kids and all those other things. Okay, you need these things because you got more stress than basically anybody else going on in your life. So by doing these difficult things well before you get into the divorce, then it makes it easier. But if for your listeners who are in the divorce process, do the things that take care of you and make you better. Take care of your health, eat a good diet, have strong relationships, and be ready and willing to talk to people, whether it's male friends, female friends, relatives, faith leaders, professionals. Talk to people and get the feedback that you need, and be around people that want the best for you. Because you got to remember, a friend is going to listen to your bullshit, tell you it's bullshit, listen to it more, occasionally kick your ass or give you the hug. So they want to see the best version of you. That's not an enabler. Enabler drives you to the bar to get a drink if you're having problems, and will stand back and will make you want to feel good in the moment. A real friend will want you to be better overall. They want to see the best possible version of you. So they need to be there to help get you through it. Also, I had some friends who had been divorced previously, both male and female, so a couple years ahead. So I was actually there for them when they were going through their divorce. I didn't realize how much I'd helped them out. I was just being my friend. And so they reached out and helped get me through too. So having almost like a mentor through it is very important. Same way that I've got a mentor in the autism world. I got a buddy whose son is about 4 or 5 years older than mine. So he was able to give me a lot of early guidance and advice, and I could still call him up and say, dude, I'm losing it. And he'd be like, don't lose it. Let me help you out. Let's talk about it. So having those people that you can connect with to be strong for you when you need it, like my friend that was having freak out during my ultra marathon. I focused on helping them, and I was able to get another 8-10 miles in without realizing it. So my mom, the nun, always said, if you're having a bad day, help somebody else out. Nice. But have those friends who are there to help you out, because you're going to have those really bad days.
Matthew P. Hoffman. Matthew is from Greenville, South Carolina, and is a dad to 3 children, 25, 22, and 13. Matthew is also a national speaker and the author of The Kick-Ass Husband, Winning at Life, Marriage, and Sex. I'm going to do it a little different for you. Some word of advice for any couples that are on the edge or thinking about, breaking up their marriages. And on the flip side, any divorcees that are starting new relationships, that you can give them advice that you would give them as they go into that new relationship or look for new relationships to make sure that, they start on the right foot.
Sure. I always, people, when they're dating or with somebody and they say, how do I know if this person's right? And I'm a big fan of looking at how they do the small things. How somebody, how do they treat the cashier at the checkout, the server, the bartender, anybody in any way, the postal office, when they are interacting with neighbors and other people, how are they loving and respecting those people? Because I think it's a real microcosm into what you can expect in the relationship. And if you see them modeling the behavior to others that you want modeled to you, that's great. And even to their own family members, how do they relate to their family members? So for someone that's divorced and saying, I want to figure out if it's the right person again, the second thing I would say is have the hard discussions first. while you're dating. In other words, before you get married. And if you're already married, you should still have them because they're beneficial. And that good old question of what did love look like for you growing up, right? Or what is real commitment? You know, what does real commitment look like to you? What does that mean the person does? You know, if they're committed, asking those questions about their history, because if you understand their history and where they came from, you can get a really good sense of how they're going to show up in your relationship. Because if they go, oh my gosh, my dad cheated on my mom, you know, he was never there for her, it was brutal. Okay, that's tough. How does that make you feel carrying forward into another relationship? How do you, you know, what does it take for you to feel trust and to feel trusted, right? If they had trust issues growing up and they haven't dealt with them, you don't want those issues to come up when you said I do and tied the knot. You kind of want to talk about it beforehand. So the more questions you can ask to engage them about those, about their history and really understanding, and it's not to place blame, but it's to understand, because those are the things that are coming with them into your relationship, whether you like it or not. And if you're comfortable with it and you've talked about it, then you've crossed a lot of that difficult, those rough waters early.
Bezalel Rothstein is a father of 4 daughters from his first marriage, 3 sons, and a daughter in his second marriage, and 1 stepdaughter from his current wife's first marriage. Bezalel is a certified family mediator and divorce coach, and the founder of an organization called Todos. You know, this podcast is put out there to help guys going through divorce, thinking about divorce, dads that, you know, just thinking, you know, it's so rough. I don't know if I can do it. Is this the right thing? How do I get through it? And some advice you would give to those dads that, you know, are going through divorce or thinking about divorce, that you would leave them with.
Yeah. So again, it goes back to I guess like kind of like a tagline that I mentioned earlier, which is, if you can't be the dad that you want to be the person that your kids want to be their dad. You know, if you do get, you know, somebody who is divorced, so some days you're with your kids and some days you're not. And, you know, when you make that transition from being a full-time dad, or, you know, to parenting full-time to parenting part-time. So, you know, a lot of times, you know, it leads to just like feeling like destabilized, like to like losing that anchor, losing that focus of like, okay, like, you know, like my life like revolves so much around my kids. So I think that the idea is that your life should always revolve around your kids. Like always, like don't do something that if your kids saw you doing it, they wouldn't be proud of. Like always try to do something that your kids will be proud of. Like create a name for yourself that if your kids bump into somebody on the street, they're like, oh, Ben Stern's your dad? I love Ben Stern. He's such a great guy. Yoel Farkas is your dad. Like, oh, he's such a yummy guy. Like, always, like, let that
Yummy, I like that.
be. Let that be, you know, your drive. You know, that when your kids bump into somebody, that they're like, oh wow, like, you know, your kids go to a wedding, like, oh, what's your last name? Your last name's Rothstein. Are you related to Rothstein in Highland Park? Like you are. Oh my God! Like, you're such a good family. You know, so
Amazing.
even when your kids are not with you, let them be with you in spirit. That you should create those moments for them.
With Ryan Lexer. Ryan is a ex-pro basketball player turned VP of sales for a publicly traded ad tech company. He is the father to a son 17 and a daughter 15. Some advice that you would give to a dad who's thinking about, is in the process of getting divorced, or it's coming up in conversations, or we do have 20% of our listeners are female. So even speaking to, it could be a couple that's listening. Some advice that being on the other side of it.
So I would say that either forget about the money, forget about I think a lot of it comes down to the money, and there's a lot of hurt involved. There's going to be hurt on either side, especially if you're not bringing on the divorce, and you need to just swallow that and just think of like the long term. almost like a business strategy. Like, what's the long term, what's 5 years, 10 years look like? Where do you want to be? And for me, I just, listen, I could have been an asshole, and I could have, done a lot of damaging things and punishing things financially. And I was just like, you know what, it's not worth it. I'm just gonna, whatever. I'm gonna take the high road, and I'm gonna give what I need to give, and even be generous. And so, just think of, what's the best way to say it? Just, don't think of the money, don't think of the power. Just think of like how you can meet in the middle, and you'll try to have a good relationship. Like, aim for I have a very good relationship with my ex-wife. We just went through a demonstration. I'm not a political guy in any way, but we thought it'd be good for the kids. And we went together. So just, don't let the money get in the way. Let your soon to be ex-spouse kind of get what they want, and you'll get what you want. And that's really the best way forward.
Is to share a Too Dad to Quit moment. A moment where you've been proudest of yourself as a father, and you just sat back and were like, man, I'm the dad. And we can't wait to get started and share with you season 2. We have some really amazing guests coming on. And thank you all for listening. This has been Too Dad to Quit. Too Dad to Quit on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, toodadtoquit.com. Please reach out to us. We do want to share your story. And please reach out to us so we can get you in part of season 2.
Thank you for listening to the Too Dad to Quit podcast. Available at toodadtoquit.com. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode.